Hey guys, it's Chris. From the man who fashioned a suit out of human skin to the guy who agreed to be eaten alive, and the story of a monkey hanged for being a spy. Here are 10 of the creepiest things people have ever done. Number 10. The skin suit. There's nobody in the world as creepy and horrifying as Ed Gein. This guy is notorious for the brutal murder spree he went on back in the 1950s. He's also known as the Butcher of Plainfield. He had a bit of a problem with peeling people's skin off and turning it into creepy stuff. Back in 1957, when police raided Ed's farmhouse looking for a missing shop owner, they instead found a literal house of horrors. They did indeed find the body of Bernice Warden, but the body had been decapitated and gutted just like a deer. The police also found bowls that had been crafted from human skulls, and a belt made from nipples, and a lampshade created from a stretched human face. Not only that, but Ed used the skins taken from various women he had killed to make himself a skin suit. In the end, Ed told the police he wanted to climb inside his skin suit so he could become his dead mother. Basically, Ed Gein holds the title as the creepiest person to have ever existed. Of course, Ed Gein has inspired a lot of horror characters throughout the years. Mostly, it's been his legendary skin suit that has gotten the attention. For example, in Silence of the Lambs, the killer Buffalo Bill is based on Ed Gein. So is Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Norman Bates from Psycho. Number 9. The Monkey Spy. During the Napoleonic Wars in the early 19th century, the English did something absolutely horrible. They hung an innocent monkey, mistaking him for a French spy. To this day, the people of Hartlepool are called monkey killers or monkey hangers by people from the rest of the country. Why was a monkey hung like a common criminal, though? Well, it all started when a French ship was spotted off the coast of Hartlepool. The good townsfolk were nervous about a French invasion, so they rushed to the beach to see what was going on. They found only one survivor from the wreckage of the ship. It was a monkey dressed in a miniature military uniform. There was probably no sight more adorable in all of England at the time, but there was a big issue. The people of this small town had never seen a Frenchman before. They actually thought the monkey was a Frenchman, a French spy trying to infiltrate British society. The most bizarre trial ever ensued. The monkey was brought to court to see if it was guilty of spying. Unfortunately for the monkey, he was a monkey and he couldn't really answer any of the questions he was asked. So the townsfolk did what townsfolk do best. They dragged him down to the town square, got him up into the gallows, and they hung that poor monkey. Here's the creepy part of the story, though. Back in those days, small children were usually employed on warships to prime cannons with gunpowder because they were small and could easily fit into tight spaces. They were called powder monkeys. To this day, historical experts believe it wasn't a real monkey hung by the Hartlepool people, but actually a small child. Number 8. The baby cage. There was a very creepy craze that swept across the nation between 1934 and 1948. The sensation was known as the baby cage. Yes, a cage for babies. This bizarre invention was created in 1922, though the idea came from 1884, when Dr. Luther Emmett Holt described in a book called The Care and Feeding of Children that babies should be properly aired out. The belief was that babies needed fresh air in order to purify their blood. Giving a baby plenty of air was just as important as feeding it proper food. So how does a person living in the busy city in the 1930s give a baby sufficient air for the purification of its blood? Well, the obvious answer is to put your baby in a cage and attach the cage to the outside of your apartment window. By doing this, people believed they would improve the baby's appetite, that they would help its digestion, and that it would just generally be healthier. Also, people believed that by sticking their babies out in the cold wind, they would toughen them up. Babies would be able to withstand the common cold. They would become impervious to cold temperatures, and they would just be generally better. By the late 1940s, baby cages became unfashionable, something about safety concerns, no doubt. Number 7. Eaten alive. James Jameson was the heir of the Jameson Irish whiskey fortune in the 1880s. He had fortune beyond compare. He was what you might call an elite member of society. And what did elite members of society do with their money 140 years ago? Well, James used his cash to travel to Africa, purchase a 10-year-old child, and then draw her being eaten alive by cannibals. This is a very real thing that happened by every historical account. James was the great-great-grandson of John Jameson, the guy who came up with your favorite Irish whiskey. In the 1800s, adventuring and exploring the remotest corners of the world was kind of a huge deal, especially to those who could afford to do it. So in 1888, James joined the Emin Pasha Relief Expedition to move across Central Africa. At the time, the Congo was a Belgian Free State colony. It was occupied by Belgian forces. But here's the incident with the cannibalism. It happened in June. Accounts from both Jameson's diary, his wife, and a translator from the trip all agree more or less on the details. They were at a trading post deep in the jungle of the Congo, famous for its population of cannibals. Jameson dealt directly with one of the most notorious slave traders in all of Africa at the time, a man named Tippu-Tip. Jameson wanted to see someone eaten. With the help of the slave trader, he got himself a young slave girl. Then he took her to one of the cannibal villages and handed her over as a present, at which point the child was tied to a tree and eaten alive. While the tribesmen ripped her limbs off and ate her flesh, James Jameson sat back in his comfy chair and sketched the scene in his notebook. Number 6. Coffin birth. During the days of the Black Death in Italy, there was a lot of creepy stuff going on, but this next one really takes the cake. Scientists recently investigated a grave from the 14th century, located a handful of miles outside Genoa, Italy. Genoa is the city in which the plague really took root in Europe, before spreading throughout the entire continent. Inside of this mysterious grave, scientists discovered the bodies of 4 people. There was a woman who had died in her 30s, a child of about 12, and another child of about 3. The 4th skeleton is the most horrifying, though. Scientists discovered the remains of a baby, but what exactly was it doing in the coffin? It was born after the woman died. This lady gave birth from beyond the grave, and the baby likely perished inside the coffin without anyone ever knowing it existed. It's known as a coffin birth, and it's a very strange phenomenon. Coffin birth can happen after death when the gases inside a pregnant woman's body build up enough and cause the unexpected expulsion of the fetus. It doesn't happen very often, but it's pretty shocking when it does. Number 5. History's first serial killer. Giles de Reyes is often called the first true serial killer in history, and yeah, the guy's a bit of a creep. He was a Breton nobleman who fought in the 100 Years' War and was friends with Joan of Arc, but he never rose to fame or secured his place in the Hall of Heroes because he may have had a bit of an issue with murdering children. In 1429, Giles was given the position of Marshal of France, the highest military distinction in the country. His military career then began to slow down once Joan of Arc died in 1431. He spent most of his time at his estate after that. He financed the construction of a new chapel in 1433 and named it the Chapel of Holy Innocents. He staffed the chapel with a choir of young boys who he himself selected. And here's where the creepy rumors began. Some say Giles de Reyes began consorting with alchemists and sorcerers. At the same time, people started growing suspicious of the man and his estate because children were going missing in the general area. He was eventually arrested in 1440 after kidnapping a priest. And it was only after that the accusations came out that he had murdered at least 100 children. He was sentenced to be burned and hung and was executed on October 26th of that same year. Number 4. The dungeon beneath the house. Joseph Fritzl was the most disgusting, creepy, and despicable human being that ever lived. Well, I guess that's kind of hard to make a firm decision about considering the guy we just talked about had killed 100 kids and was burned alive for it, but still, Joseph was pretty awful. In August of 1984, he locked his daughter in the cellar beneath their house and he never let her out. He had been building a dungeon complex beneath his house since the decade before. He got permission from the city to build the dungeon. Of course, they didn't know what it was going to be used for, and he gathered all the supplies himself to get everything just right. Then he tricked his daughter once it was finished and locked her behind a series of doors in a dungeon built exactly for this purpose. He had premeditated kidnapping his own child for years, turning her into his personal property. And what's really crazy is that Joseph's wife had no idea what was going on. She thought their daughter just kind of ran away. Joseph kept their daughter in the cold and the dark of that dungeon for the next 24 years. And during that time, she would birth 7 of his babies, 3 of which were forced to stay underground and grew up to be basically goblins. The others were adopted by their father/grandfather. In the end, the daughter was finally freed when her 19-year-old kid became gravely ill, and Joseph drove her to the hospital. The doctors became suspicious, and the daughter was finally released, and Joseph Fritzl is still in jail today. Number 3. Buffalo Priest. A priest in Buffalo has been accused of touching somebody a little too inappropriately this past January. The name of the priest was not given, though he was described as being elderly. Apparently, the priest was retired but still said Mass at a variety of different churches. The girl who complained about the behavior told someone at school that there had been an incident with the priest. The The district attorney's office became aware of the allegations, and they launched an investigation. However, the Erie County District Attorney's Office later came out and said that there was absolutely no grounds to lay charges. District Attorney John J. Flynn said the priest's conduct wasn't criminal, but it was definitely creepy. It also wasn't a false claim at all. It just wasn't a criminal act. More the act of a creepy old man. Maybe he should be in a home instead of wandering freely around churches and children. Number 2, a creepy intruder. A family in Albuquerque experienced something beyond creepy. It all happened when Maris Lopez was deleting videos from her doorbell camera. She discovered the video of a stranger loitering on their porch in front of their front door for 6 hours the night before the video was taken. Maris and the rest of her family watched the video in utter disbelief. The man walked onto their porch at around midnight on a Tuesday. He put his backpack down and then smoked cigarettes and paced back and forth, even dropping his pants to moon the camera at one point. This madness went on for 6 full hours, until the sun began to come up at 6 a.m. He was caught peeping through the windows several times, and he didn't leave until the family woke up. They had no idea he was even there until Maris checked the footage. Luckily, no one was ever harmed. So far as we know, the creep never came back. But still, how could the family ever sleep soundly knowing this guy was still on the prowl? Number 1, the agreeable victim. In the small German town of Rottenburg, a man agreed to be eaten. This was one of the biggest and strangest criminal trials ever in the country. Armin Muse was a perfectly ordinary computer expert, 42 years old, respected by his neighbors. He also had a creepy old mansion, and inside this creepy old mansion, he killed, fried, and ate a man named Bernd Brands. How did the two men meet? Well, Armin placed an advertisement on the internet saying he was looking for someone who would like to be cooked and eaten. Bernd responded to the advertisement. Everyone involved knew exactly what they were getting into. On March 9th of 2001, Bernd showed up at Armin's house to be cooked and eaten. He swallowed 20 sleeping pills, half a bottle of schnapps, and then Armin cut off his manhood, fried it, and the two men ate it together. But this was the last meal they would share. By the early hours of the morning, the romance was over. Bernd was stabbed in the neck, chopped into pieces, and over the next several weeks, those pieces were slowly turned into dinners and lunches and chased down with South African red wine. Police soon arrested Armin and put him on trial for murder. The case got a bit confusing when German lawyers realized cannibalism was never explicitly made illegal in Germany. In the end, even though it had been voluntary and even though there was a video of the entire evening with the victim stating his willingness to be murdered, Armin was given life in prison. So which of these sick puppies grossed you out the most? Let me know in the comments, and thanks as always for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button for all the latest videos from the channel.